Expectations are an inevitable part of life. From the moment we begin to grow, we are surrounded by people who expect something from us. To succeed, to behave a certain way, to live according to their standards. Often these expectations come from family members who truly believe they are guiding us toward a better future. Yet, what begins as care can easily transform into an emotional burden, a weight that slowly drains the joy out of living. When expectations are reasonable, they push us to discover our potential. But when they are rigid, unrealistic, or emotionally charged, they begin to suffocate us. We start living not out of passion or purpose, but out of cost pressure. The constant need to please others becomes a silent chain that binds the soul. And the most painful truth is that this pressure often comes from the people we love the most. In many families, especially traditional ones, elders like uncles or mentors play a powerful role in shaping younger lives. They offer advice, discipline, and guidance. But sometimes, that guidance becomes a form of emotional control. They may demand perfection without realizing that perfection is a prison. They may measure love through achievement, turning affection into a reward rather than a constant. And when that happens, a child learns that love must be the self-earned, not simply us felt. Plus, the pain of carrying someone else's expectations is subtle but deep. It begins with wanting to make them proud, to hear the words, "I'm proud of you." But as time passes, it becomes an obsession, a desperate need to avoid their disappointment. You begin to make decisions not based on your dreams, but based on their vision. You silence your desires, hide your true self, and wear the mask of what they want you to be. On the outside, you might look successful, but on the inside, you start to feel like a stranger to yourself. And the tragedy of it all, the one setting the expectations often believes they are helping. They don't see how their high standards are breaking the spirit of the person trying to meet them. They don't hear the silent cries of exhaustion, fear, and longing behind every forced smile. They forget that love should empower, not enslave. And the tragedy of it all, the one setting the expectations often believes they are helping. They don't see how their high standards are breaking the spirit of the person trying to meet them. They don't hear the silent cries of exhaustion, fear, and longing behind every forced smile. They forget that love should empower, not enslave. Expectations become emotional burdens when they demand conformity instead of understanding. They become heavy when they strip away individuality. They become painful when love is conditional, when affection depends on performance. Over time, this emotional pressure doesn't just cause stress, it causes numbness. You stop feeling joy in success because it never feels enough. You stop feeling excitement for life because it's not your life anymore, it's someone else's script. The most heartbreaking part of living under such weight is the loneliness it creates. When your worth depends on fulfilling another person's dream, you lose your connection to your own heart. You begin to die emotionally, quietly, invisibly, while appearing fine to the world. But here lies the truth. You are not obligated to meet someone else's expectations to deserve love. Real love should never feel like a burden, it should feel like belonging. The moment you recognize this, the healing begins. You start shedding the layers of guilt, fear, and pressure that others placed upon you. You start breathing again, freely, authentically, and without apology. Because the truth is, expectations may shape us, but they should never define us. When we learn to replace pressure with purpose, and fear with freedom, we finally reclaim our lives. And in doing so, we remind ourselves, and others, that love without understanding is not love at all. Is love in its truest form, is meant to be a source of strength, not submission. It should empower, not imprison. Yet, too often, love becomes confused with control. What begins as care slowly turns into command, and what was once affection starts to feel like authority. When that happens, love stops being a gift and becomes a weight. True love doesn't demand obedience, it inspires growth. It doesn't dictate what you must do, who you must be, or how you should live. Instead, it provides the emotional space for you to discover those things yourself. But sadly, in many families, especially in traditional structures, love is often used as a tool of expectation. If you love me, you'll do this, or, if you respect me, you'll live this way. What sounds like care is often a form of control disguised as love. Control always wears a mask. It might sound like concern. I just want what's best for you. It might look like discipline. I'm doing this for your good. But underneath it often lies fear. The fear of losing influence, the fear of being forgotten, or the fear that the younger generation will live differently than the one before. Out of this fear, love becomes conditional. It starts saying, I will love you if, instead of, I love you no matter what. When love becomes conditional, it breeds guilt. The person being loved feels they must earn affection through compliance. They stop expressing their real feelings, suppress their desires, and live in quiet tension. They start measuring their worth not by who they are, but by how well they can meet someone else's expectations. And the more they try to please, the more they lose themselves. This kind of control doesn't just damage relationships, it destroys trust. Because control says, I know what's right for you, while love says, I trust you to find what's right for yourself. Control restricts growth, love celebrates it. Control fears change, love welcomes it. When love is genuine, it uplifts. It makes you feel safe enough to take risks, to make mistakes, to fall and rise again. That's the kind of love that helps people become the best version of themselves. Many people mistake control for protection. They think, I'm just guiding them, when in truth they're limiting them. The heart that truly loves doesn't clip wings. It teaches how to fly. It understands that every person has their own journey to walk, even if that journey doesn't look like the one we imagined for them. Love that uplifts is patient. It doesn't rush you to meet expectations. It doesn't compare you to others. It allows you to feel seen, heard, and valued for who you are, not who someone wants you to become. When you experience that kind of love, it becomes your anchor in chaos and your motivation to keep going, even when life gets hard. And sometimes, realizing that love has turned into control is painful. It forces you to question relationships you thought were built on care. But that awareness is the first step toward healing. Because love should never make you feel trapped, it should make you feel free. The deepest truth is this clucks love that uplifts does not take away your voice. It helps you find it. It doesn't demand perfection. It cherishes presence. It doesn't hold you down. It stands beside you. When love is free of control, it transforms lives, mends hearts, and leaves behind peace instead of pain. So if love ever starts to feel like a cage instead of a home, remember, that's not love. Real love doesn't demand surrender, it offers strength. And in the end, the love that uplifts is the only kind worth keeping. Human beings are born with an instinct to seek connection, belonging, and acceptance. From childhood, we look for approval, from our parents, teachers, friends, and later, from society itself. It begins innocently with the desire to be praised for doing something right. But over time, this need for approval can grow into a silent chain, one that binds our hearts and minds until we start living not for ourselves, but for others. When approval becomes the measure of our worth, it quietly erodes our spirit. Every decision starts to feel like a test, every mistake like a failure, and every silence like disappointment. You begin to question yourself constantly. Am I enough? Am I doing this right? Will they be proud of me? This invisible pressure, to always please, to never disappoint, can slowly drain the joy out of living. In families, this burden often takes root early. When a child learns that love or praise only comes after achievement, they start linking their value to performance. If I do well, they'll love me. If I fail, I'll let them down. This conditional affection plants a lifelong fear, the fear of not being good enough. As adults, we carry that fear into every relationship and every dream, haunted by the idea that someone's disapproval means we failed as a person. Approval, in its healthy form, can motivate. But when it becomes a necessity, it becomes poison. It kills creativity, honesty, and authenticity. People begin to hide parts of themselves that might not fit the expectations of others. They wear masks to be accepted, to be praised, to be seen, even if it means losing touch with who they really are. The heart that once beat freely becomes heavy with the constant need to prove its worth. The most painful part is that those seeking approval often believe they're doing the right thing. They think they're maintaining peace, showing respect, or being responsible. But deep down, they're sacrificing their inner peace to maintain an image of being good enough. Over time, that emotional exhaustion can turn into quiet resentment, not toward others, but toward themselves for never feeling free to be genuine. True love and understanding never demand proof of worth. They offer acceptance even when you falter, respect even when you disagree, and love even when you fail. But when someone, a parent, a teacher, a mentor, or even society, makes their affection conditional, they unknowingly teach others that they must earn love, and that belief can crush a person's sense of identity. The weight of approval is heavy because it never ends. Once you seek it, you become trapped in a cycle. The more you receive, the more you fear losing it. You start making choices not because they feel right to you, but because they will make others happy. And slowly, your life stops being yours, stuck to break free. One must realize that approval is not love, and validation is not peace. Real peace comes from self-acceptance, from knowing your heart, understanding your values, and being okay with not pleasing everyone. You don't need to be perfect to be worthy. You don't need constant validation to be valuable. It takes courage to step away from the need for approval, especially from those you love. But the moment you start living authentically, doing what aligns with your truth rather than someone else's expectation, that weight begins to lift. And then, something beautiful happens. You start to breathe again. You start to feel again. You realize that your worth was never meant to be measured by someone else's opinion. It has always been within you. Because the spirit doesn't break from failure. It breaks from the constant pressure to be as approved. True strength comes when you stop chasing validation and start embracing your own voice. Even if it shakes, even if it stands alone. There are wounds that don't bleed and silences that scream louder than words ever could. One of the deepest forms of pain a person can experience is not rejection, not loss, but the quiet agony of a second not being heard. It's when your thoughts, feelings, and truths are met with indifference or judgment instead of understanding. Over time, that silence doesn't just hurt, it empties you. It's what we call emotional death. As emotional death doesn't happen suddenly, it's not one moment of heartbreak. It's the slow erosion of one's inner voice, a fading of the self that once believed it mattered. When you speak but no one listens, when you cry but no one notices, when you express pain and it's dismissed as weakness, something inside begins to shut down. The heart, once open and alive, starts to protect itself by withdrawing. For many, this experience begins at home. Families often mistake silence for peace or obedience for understanding. A child who's told to stay quiet, be strong, or don't make a fuss, learns that their emotions are a burden. They grow into adults who suppress their truth to avoid conflict or rejection. And while the world sees them as calm, strong, or mature, inside they are slowly dying. Unseen, unheard, untouched by genuine empathy. The tragedy of emotional death lies in its invisibility. The person suffering may still smile, still laugh, still go through the motions of daily life. But their heart no longer beats with hope. They stop dreaming, stop trusting, stop reaching out. Because what's the point of speaking when no one listens? It's a loneliness that exists even in the presence of others. We all have a basic human need to be acknowledged. Not necessarily agreed with, but the suds understood. To have someone truly listen, not just to the words we say but to the emotions beneath them. When that doesn't happen, the soul begins to believe that it doesn't matter, and that belief, more than any loss or betrayal, is what causes the death of spirit. Even those who appear emotionally strong can crumble when they feel unheard. The weight of unexpressed emotions becomes unbearable. People begin to numb themselves, through work, distractions, or detachment, because it feels safer not to feel at all than to risk being ignored again. But in that numbness, life loses its color. Relationships become mechanical, conversations become shallow, and joy feels distant. Being heard is more than a courtesy. It's a form of emotional survival. It tells the heart, you exist. You matter. You're not alone. When someone listens with compassion, not to fix, not to judge, but simply to understand, it can revive a soul that has long been quiet. One genuine moment of empathy can reignite hope in someone who thought they'd been forgotten by the world. It's important to remember that emotional death isn't permanent. The heart, though wounded, still longs to be revived. It waits, sometimes for years, for someone to truly hear it. And when that happens, when love and understanding are offered without conditions, the heart begins to heal. If you've ever felt unheard, know this: your voice still matters. Even if no one around you listens, your truth is still valid. Speak it anyway. Write it, sing it, whisper it, but don't bury it. Because every time you silence your heart, you step further away from yourself. And if you are the listener, be present, not just with your ears, but with your heart. Because your willingness to truly hear someone could be the difference between a heart that dies quietly in isolation and a heart that learns to hope again. In the end, emotional death happens when the heart stops being heard. But emotional rebirth begins the moment someone finally listens. There comes a point in life when silence is no longer peace, it becomes a prison. Many people spend years, even decades, suppressing their emotions, holding back their truth, and trying to fit into the expectations of others. They live cautiously, speaking only what is safe, agreeing when they want to resist, smiling when their heart is breaking. But deep inside, their spirit begins to ache for freedom, for the right to speak, to be heard, and most importantly, to the be themselves. Healing, in its purest form, begins not when someone rescues us, but when we find the courage to reclaim our own voice. The voice we lost somewhere between fear and expectation. The one that once spoke freely before judgment taught us to stay quiet. When we begin to express our truth again, no matter how fragile or uncertain it sounds, we start to come alive. For many, losing their voice doesn't happen overnight. It starts subtly. A parent dismissing a feeling, a teacher silencing a question, a loved one making you feel guilty for expressing pain. Over time, we learn to associate silence with safety. If I don't speak, I won't be hurt. If I don't argue, I won't be rejected. But in protecting ourselves from conflict, we also shield ourselves from growth, authenticity, and connection. We end up living someone else's version of who we should be. Reclaiming your voice is an act of courage, especially when it's been silenced for years. It means daring to express your feelings, even when they're messy, misunderstood, or uncomfortable. It's saying, "This is what I feel," without apologizing for it. It's standing by your truth, even if others don't understand it. And it's realizing that your emotions are not weaknesses. They are messages from your soul, reminding you of what matters most. When you start speaking your truth, healing begins in unexpected ways. The moment you put words to pain, it loses some of its power over you. The shame you once carried in silence begins to fade, replaced by strength and self-awareness. Your relationships start to shift too, because when you communicate honestly, the connections that are real deepen, and the ones built on pretense fall away. Reclaiming your voice also means forgiving yourself. For the years you stayed quiet, for the moments you let others speak for you, for the times you pretended to be fine. Silence is not failure, it's survival. You did what you needed to do to protect yourself then. But now, healing asks for something new, to trust that your voice is worthy of being heard. The beauty of finding your voice again is that it doesn't just heal you, it heals others. When you speak your truth with honesty and vulnerability, you give permission to others to do the same. You show them that it's okay to have emotions, to be imperfect, to stand up for what feels right. Your courage becomes a quiet invitation for others to find theirs. It's important to remember that reclaiming your voice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a whisper. Sometimes it's simply saying no when you used to say eyes. Sometimes it's sharing a story, setting a boundary, or asking for help. Every act of self-expression, no matter how small, is a step toward freedom. The heart can only begin to heal when it is finally allowed to speak, because pain that stays unspoken festers, but pain that is voiced begins to release. When you reclaim your voice, you reclaim your identity, your boundaries, your dignity, and most of all, your peace. So, speak, even if your voice trembles, even if no one claps, even if no one understands. Because your voice is the bridge between your wounds and your healing, and once you find it, no one, not even the weight of the past, can take it away again. There comes a moment in every person's life when they realize that carrying pain, resentment, and guilt doesn't protect them. It only weighs them down. The longer we hold on to the wounds others gave us, or the mistakes we made ourselves, the smaller our sense of worth becomes. Forgiveness, though often misunderstood, is not about forgetting or excusing what happened. It's about the ceaseless releasing ourselves from the emotional chains that keep us bound to pain. Only then can true freedom and self-worth begin to bloom again. Forgiveness is one of the most powerful yet misunderstood acts of strength. Many people resist it because they believe forgiving means accepting injustice or weakness. But in truth, forgiveness is not about freeing the person who hurt you. It's about freeing yourself. When we hold on to anger or resentment, we continue to relive the pain, giving it the power to define us. Every time we revisit an old wound, we reaffirm the belief that we are broken, unworthy, or undeserving of peace. But when we forgive, not for their sake, but for our own, we reclaim control of our inner world. Self-worth and forgiveness are deeply intertwined. You cannot feel truly worthy if you carry shame, guilt, or bitterness inside your heart. The moment you choose forgiveness, you are declaring that your peace matters more than your pain. You are saying, "I deserve to move forward." And that simple truth becomes the seed of rebirth. Freedom, in this context, isn't just about external circumstances. It's emotional liberation. It's when you no longer allow your past to dictate your present. It's when you wake up one morning and realize that you can think about a painful memory without feeling crushed by it. That kind of freedom doesn't happen overnight, but every act of letting go, every moment of compassion, every release of blame, becomes a step closer to peace. The process of forgiveness often begins with self-compassion. Before we can forgive others, we must forgive ourselves. For trusting the wrong people, for not knowing better, for reacting out of fear or pain. Self-forgiveness is not self-excuse, it's self-understanding. It's recognizing that every version of you, even the one who made mistakes, was doing the best they could with what they knew at the time. When you stop punishing yourself for being human, your sense of worth begins to rise again, quietly but powerfully. Forgiveness also allows space for empathy, not necessarily agreement, but understanding. It's realizing that hurt people often hurt others, and that the cycle of pain only continues when we refuse to release it. Breaking that cycle doesn't make you weak, it makes you whole. It takes tremendous courage to say, "This ends with me." That courage is the foundation of emotional freedom. When forgiveness and freedom meet, self-worth is reborn. You begin to see yourself not as a victim of your story, but as the author of a new chapter. The same experiences that once broke you start to shape your wisdom and compassion. You stop living in reaction to others' expectations or approval. You stop measuring your value through pain. Instead, you stand tall in your truth, aware of your scars, but no longer defined by them. Forgiveness is the soil where healing grows, and freedom is the sunlight that allows it to thrive. When both are present, self-worth blooms naturally, steady, radiant, and unshakable. You begin to see yourself as you truly are, resilient, capable, and deserving of peace. So let go, forgive, not because they deserve it, but because you do. Set your heart free from the weight of the past, and watch how your spirit begins to rise again. Because when forgiveness opens the door and freedom steps in, that's when self-worth, long buried under pain, finally comes home.